The desert is silent at night until it isn't. Footsteps where no one should be. A voice calling your name. Familiar, yet wrong. You tell yourself it's just the wind. You tell yourself it's just an animal. But deep down, you know the truth. They're out there, watching, waiting. In the shadows of the American Southwest, there exists a legend as old as time itself. They walk among us, silent, unseen, shifting. Creatures of the darkness. You may see the flash of glowing eyes in the dark, a shape that isn't quite human. You try to run, but it's faster. You try to hide, but it already knows where you are. Because this is no ordinary predator. And once it chooses you, it never stops hunting. The Skinwalker. Welcome back to Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast. This is Season 1, The Oleander Files, Episode 2, Skinwalker. I'm Michael, and let's get right into this. The term Skinwalker originates from Navajo culture and refers to a type of harmful witch with the ability to transform into, possess, or disguise themselves as animals. In Navajo tradition, Skinwalkers are seen as witches who gain their abilities by performing dark rituals. These often involve grave violations of cultural taboos, such as harming a close family member. Unlike spiritual leaders or healers, Skinwalkers use their powers for malicious purposes, including harming, manipulation, and fear. And in some cases, death. Skinwalkers are believed to take the form of various animals such as wolves, coyotes, foxes, or even owls. They are said to wear the skins or pelts of the animals they transform into, which is taboo in the Navajo culture unless used for ceremonial purposes. Beyond shape-shifting, Skinwalkers are attributed with supernatural abilities, such as mimicking voices, moving with unnatural speed, or even reading minds. They are said to use their powers for nefarious purposes, such as causing illness, death, or misfortune. For those who believe in the myth of Skinwalkers, discussions about them are generally avoided. The topic itself is treated with seriousness and caution due to its spiritual and cultural implications. In recent years, stories of Skinwalkers have gained attention outside of Navajo culture, particularly in urban legends and paranormal discussions. Skinwalker Ranch has become very popular. It's a site in Utah, reputed for paranormal activity. It has popularized the Skinwalker lore in mainstream media and culture. Though the phenomenon of the Skinwalker has grown to so much more than its origins. For instance, the Skinwalker Ranch, located in Utah, has become infamous for a wide range of paranormal activities, including UFO sightings, strange creatures, and cattle mutilations. While not directly tied to Navajo beliefs, the ranch's name comes from those who claim the land is cursed and connected to Skinwalkers. Visitors to the area have reported seeing humanoid creatures with glowing eyes and hearing unearthly sounds. The ranch remains a hotspot for researchers and thrill seekers interested in the paranormal. Another story about the Skinwalkers comes from the Boudreaux family, traveling through a remote desert road at night, began hearing unsettling noises, scraping on the windows and whispers in the wind. Suddenly, a figure darted across their headlights. It was a creature that looked like a coyote, but moved on two legs. As the family sped away, the creature chased them at an unnatural speed. When they reached the safety of their destination, an elderly neighbor explained that they had likely crossed a path frequented by skinwalkers. Another story. A Navajo shepherd once stayed overnight in the desert with his sheep. Late into the night, he heard the voice of his cousin calling his name. Confused, since his cousin lived far away, he stood to investigate. The voice grew louder, coming from the darkness. As he approached, he noticed glowing eyes reflecting the moonlight. Fearing a skinwalker, he ran back to his camp, ignoring the calls. The next day, he learned his cousin had been ill and bedridden, nowhere near the area. And finally, a story of a woman who lived alone in the mountains of Colorado. Often heard a lone howl at night. One evening, she saw a figure standing outside her window. It resembled a man wearing a wolf pelt. She immediately locked her doors and stayed inside, but the figure began scratching at the walls of her home. She said it lasted for hours. The next morning, she found animal tracks around her house that transformed into human footprints, leading the way back into the haunted forest. She immediately called relatives and asked if she could move in with them for the fear of the attack from the skinwalker. Her relatives agreed, and they all quickly came together to get her moved. But on the morning of the official move, when her relatives had shown up, she was found dead, covered in scratches, and white as a ghost. Now I could go on with 100 more stories. All it takes is a quick internet search, and you will be humbled by the myth and the lore of the skinwalker. And in my uncle's journals, he had only encountered one skinwalker, and it was everything that he had read about and more. And just a reminder that I've changed all the names and dates for safety reasons. Now, my great uncle's story begins with him and his special ops team, Squad 7734, or Team Hell, as he lovingly referred to it. My great uncle and his team, they were dispatched into the Utah desert on a search and rescue. Now, they didn't do this too often, but if they were near the vicinity of a soldier in need, they always stepped up. Now, Private Moore had been unaccounted for the last 72 hours due to the fact that he was camped in one of the most restricted military areas in Utah. It was very concerning. As they approached his last known coordinates, it led them directly to his campsite. It was undisturbed, but Private Moore was nowhere to be found. His campsite was at the base of a small outcropping of hill-like mountains on one side. On the other, there was thick desert vegetation that had grown like a wild oasis in a long-forgotten adventure movie. Now, his tent hugged the edging of the mountains about 20 feet from the start of the brush. The private's tent had shown signs of being slept in, and the fire pit close by was still warm with some burning embers glowing. Eerily, there were one set of footprints leading to the edge of the wild oasis-like scenery. But these footprints didn't make sense. They started out as military boot imprints, then in mid-step turned to human footprints, and finally, just as they reached the edge of the desert oasis, they became animal-like, almost a cross between a big cat, like a mountain lion, and a wolf. Now, my great uncle Sam managed to get a photograph of this impossible scene. He actually took photos of everything they documented that day, but this was the only one he managed to hold on to. One thing that Private Moore was known for was that he was extremely thorough in his job, and he documented everything on paper and on video. 20 yards in each direction from his campsite were 2 undisclosed military-grade video cameras, the highest tech at the time. My great uncle and his team quickly secured the camera's files and any notes the sergeant had taken. Once secure, they all searched the area for over an hour and found nothing. No signs, no struggle, nothing. It wasn't until they got back to headquarters and watched those tapes they find out the horrible, true story of what happened to Private Moore. The tapes begin with the private setting up his camp, followed by his campfire and a chair to kick back in. As he's doing that throughout the afternoon, his attention keeps being pulled to a shadowy corner of the hills. Nothing but clicking is heard on the video, but every time you hear it, his head turns towards that spot. As night falls, he turns in with no incidents the first night, other than a handful of howls in the distance throughout the tape. Things change quickly with the next evening's events. As Private Moore had turned in for the night after no events during the day and going about his duties, in the distance you hear a deep, guttural growl, which apparently wakes him up immediately. He's seen stepping out of his tent with his weapon drawn and a flashlight, desperately searching the darkness for the growls. Now, this growl can be heard on both video cameras at the same time. At first, it's in the distance. Then it's followed by another growl, which sounds directly right by the speaker of both video cameras. Private Moore continues to chase the sounds with his flashlight, its beam cutting through the night, but it doesn't seem to focus on anything. He does not find anything. After a few minutes, he gives up, goes back to his tent. Then another noise grabs his attention. This time the growl speaks, and in a low, evil tone, his name is said. Again, the sound should be in the distance, carrying through the wind, but it's not. It's directly as if it was being spoken to the speakers of both cameras at the same time. Private Moore reacts hysterically, screaming questions and threats. Who is this? Get out of here. I know you're there. I'll fucking kill you. But everything he says is repeated back to him in that same gutturally tone. Private Moore runs right up to one of the cameras, looks directly in the lens, reports what is happening, and says he thinks he's losing his mind. And my great uncle underlined the next part in his journal, and he'll never forget what this fallen soldier said. He looked directly into the camera and whispered, "It has human eyes. It has human eyes." Immediately, the sounds of scratching and another growl fill the area, and he whips around with his gun and flashlight. The flashlight drops to the ground, spitting an arc of light along the oasis and then the walls of the canyons. He immediately fires 3 shots into one direction and then 3 into the next, and then stops, trying to make sense of the situation and calm his nerves. But that's when I saw it. That's when we all saw it. When you slow down the footage, you can see what he's actually firing at. There's a shadow of a creature, wolf-shaped, yet humanoid, lurking at the foot of the hills. It races one way as he fires, and then races another as he fires that way. As he quickly realizes he hits nothing, he charges towards it. Screams and moans can be heard as he runs off camera. And then he runs back in. The hulking shadow blurs the images on both cameras, even though it should only show up on one. And just then, Private Moore reappears in frame. He's bleeding from the head and both eyes. And when you get a closer look, you realize he is now missing his left eye. And he appears to have no more ammunition. He's spinning wildly, holding his gun as if it was a sword, his last defense. And as he spins, he screams, "What do you want from me? Why are you here? What are you? Where's my eye?" Immediately, he is thrust to the ground, knocking down one of the cameras in the process. It falls to the ground on its side, giving us another vantage of this horrible scene. As the private trembles from exhaustion and fear on the ground, just a few feet from his campfire, a shadow with deep red eyes looks at one camera and then the next as it towers over him. The shadow immediately howls. But this howl's different. It doesn't sound like any other animal. As it begins to echo everywhere, the creature scoops him up in his jowls and launches itself into the air, out of view of the camera. You can hear it land and hear his body thud with a painful moan as Private Moore was now close to death. Something stumbles along behind the camera, spinning it around just enough to focus on the shadows that have now engulfed this horrific scene. A shadowy wolf-like image peers from the corner of the camera as if to try to look directly in the lens. It's hard to make out because the footage starts to scramble and get fuzzy, but you could make out the shape of a dog or a wolf or a coyote. But it's blended with a human skeletal form. But its eyes are glowing orangish red, and they are shaped like a human. Private Moore's eyes, to be exact. It looks directly into the lens, then pulls back, looks over its shoulder, and then back towards the camera, and growls. "Mine now." And the footage gets worse now because of the lighting and the damage the camera had taken from the battle. But you could see as the shadow dragged Private Moore off into the darkness. Unfortunately, he appears lifeless and is assumed dead at this point. Now, the thing my great uncle struggled with was the fact that when they showed up at the site, it looked normal. It did not resemble anything that these videos showed them. And as for the footsteps, changing from boots to human form to animal form, that never even happened on the video. Now, my great uncle and his team all had to report what they had seen, what they had witnessed, and my uncle wrote everything down the way he saw it. The one thing he didn't include in the report, though, was that days after this event, he had a bout of insomnia brought on by vivid dreams of this event and what he saw on that film. And every night, he would wake up, reliving the events as if it was he who had gone through it. And the final scene at the end of these nightmares was his face with his dog tags sticking from muddy, filthy ground in the Utah desert, just a mile away from the original campsite. Now, the thing was, they never found Private Moore or any of his personal belongings, like his dog tags, his uniform. Only the stuff left back at his camp. Growing fed up with these nightly horrors, my great uncle decided to go back to that campsite, but he went by himself. This was off the books. The site looked normal, and he almost gave up, thinking, maybe I'm losing my mind now. And that's when he heard the first howl. He followed the sound into the foothills, angry and determined to unlock this mystery. But as he followed the howls, they didn't seem to be chasing him. They seemed to be leading him somewhere. And then when he got there, he finally had the proof that he needed. As he climbed down this ridge that looked unnatural, yet beautiful, just as the sun was setting on it. The sun's rays fell upon a patch of beautiful flowers, painting them in the golden hues of the sun. But these flowers had no business growing out of the filth and dirt that was there in the desert. Centered in this group of beautiful flowers was the top half of a skull in Private Moore's muddy dog tags. They had been chewed on, and his skull looked freshly clean, with clawed scratches and bite marks. My uncle picked these up, put them in his backpack, and never told anyone he had found these. Much later, he had these tested to prove that they belonged to Private Moore. When he got the results back, he tried to return the soldier's belongings to his remaining family, but they wanted nothing to do with it. They thought it was cursed. So out of respect for a fallen soldier, my great uncle kept those until he gave them to my father. Now, people will still argue about, are skinwalkers real? Is it myth? Is it legend? Are they ghosts? Are they aliens? Are they all the above? But in the words of my great uncle, you're goddamn right they're real. And they're fucking evil. Now, he never had any of those dreams ever again. But once a year, he'd go back to that site to remember the fallen soldier. And every time he was there, he would hear a howl. Now, as I share my Uncle Sam's information from the Oleander Journal, file number 113, keep in mind that this was very real. After inheriting my great uncle's journals after my own father's death, I didn't know what to do with the information or what to believe. This story in particular, it was keeping me up at night, and I didn't know what to do with this information. One night I asked my mom, how could this be real? How could any of these be real? And she said this, and she said this only once. Son, I will never discuss this again. Uncle Samuel was the most honest man in our entire family, and he was persecuted for it. Your father and I, we loved that man. We believed that man. And these unbelievable journals are all true. In the Skinwalker story, he had physical proof. I asked her where this physical proof was, and she said my father had gotten rid of it for fear of what it could do to our family. Now, since coming into possession of these journals, and after reading this story, I've began the quest to find the evidence that my great uncle had. In the few leads that I'm following, I will have an update for you as soon as I can. Now, one quick little thing I would like to add, and I wasn't sure if I was going to share this, but I think I had my own Skinwalker sighting. I had just turned 16, newly licensed driver. And as any teenager can tell you, as soon as you get the freedom of driving, that's all you want to do is drive. And my favorite thing during those summer nights was to take my car, roll the windows down, and drive late at night. Preferably when a full moon was out. Now, one night I had done that, and on my way home, something crossed my path in the middle of the road. It looked like an animal, but it was all shadow. No details, just the outline of it. Now, I managed to stop just in time before hitting it, but it was so dark that even my headlights couldn't seem to penetrate it. Now, it moved unnatural, yet familiar. And I was like, it must be a mangy coyote or something. And before another thought could possibly pop into my head, he was gone. I sat there for a few minutes trying to figure out what I had just seen, but then noticed how late it was and knew I needed to get home. Later that night, I wrestled with the mystery of that unnatural shadow, and it really bugged me. So I got online. I did a quick search for anything familiar with that. And wouldn't you know it, the very first thing that popped up in the search engine was Skinwalkers. I've been obsessed with their myths ever since. All right, fellow travelers, as we wrap up this episode, I figured I'd give you a little update since the first episode. First off, I'd like to thank everybody that took a chance on the first episode, Bigfoot. It's been more popular than I thought, and the responses I've been getting have been great. A few of them have been a little scary, but I've loved all the interactions that I've been receiving. I've had a lot of you inquire about the dangers I had mentioned by going public with some of these stories. And I don't know if it's all in my head or I'm just trying to see things that aren't there. But ever since the first episode went live, I've been noticing a newer, unmarked, dark gray or dark gunmetal van. I think I've seen it driving a few times, but I've only been trying to pay attention to it recently. And the only reason why is because the other day it was parked not necessarily in front of my house, but kind of catty corner to it. And I'd never seen that vehicle in my neighborhood before. And it just didn't fit. I don't know. Maybe I'm just overthinking things. I'm good at that. Anyways, I just thought you guys might like the update. Again, my name is Michael. You've been listening to Project Black Garden, a Monsters and Myths podcast, Season 1, from the first journal, the Oleander Files. And as always, I want to hear your stories. Have any of you witnessed the Skinwalker? If so, reach out to me. Either comment in the section where you stream this episode, or email me at pbgharvest@gmail.com. All are welcome. You will not be judged here. I have something special for you guys with next week's episode. A horror story that's so unreal, so terrifying, that it's hard to find any information on it. This will all make more sense with episode 3, The Monstrous Clickshaw. And remember, monsters are real, and sometimes they win.